This is where I attempt to share the best books I read in 2022. Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I am going to attempt to decide on the best books of 2022. Now I have a list, and after I decided what I would do, because there was a lot of books here, I decided I would try to think of, okay, what are the 22 books that I feel were the best books I read, the top 22 for 2022 is why I did that. That gave me a couple of extras instead of a top 20. What are the top 22 books that I read in 2022? What were the best books? Now, when I rank a book, I don't necessarily rank it for, you know, how it's written or whatever. Of course, I do enjoy a book that's well written, of course. But when I rank a book 5 stars, it's more about how I feel about the book, the connections I make with the story, the characters. Does the plot, you know, drive me forward and get me excited about picking it up the next day? It's that kind of thing. So if I give a book 5 stars, that means that I enjoyed it from beginning to end, that I couldn't wait to pick it up. You know, it was such a page turner, and maybe it really made me think later. It's one of those books that I won't forget. So that's part of it too. It has to be a book that I remember fondly, that I want to keep, and that I want to reread. I want to keep it on my shelf because I'd love to revisit it later. So that's the kind of books that are on this list. Another thing I want to mention is there are books that I read this past year that are not on this list that are 5 star, but I had already read them. They're rereads. For instance, I read 3 Jane Austens this past year, but I've already read Jane Austen. And pretty much when I read Jane Austen, it's a 5-star read. I kind of just know that going into it. I think I read Pride and Prejudice, Emma, and Mansfield Park this past year. But they're not on this list because they were rereads for me. So 5-star reads that are new to me, that I had read for the first time, is what's on this list. And when I say 5 star, again, you might say, oh, well, that's just a little kid's book. But to me, it was a powerful story, or it really drew me in, or there's something special about that book. And I'll try to point those things out as we go. Okay, I'm talking too much because this is a long list. All right, so these aren't in any particular order, but there are some at the end that I have that are like top 5, top 3 kind of thing. I did have some that were really stood out from all the others. Okay, so I will start with The Nature of Fragile Things by Susan Meissner. This is on this list because it surprised me as a historical fiction. If you follow my channel, you know I enjoy historical fiction, but over the past couple of years, and historical fiction is what I say is my favorite genre. But over the past couple of years, I've noticed that historical fiction has kind of disappointed me lately. If you hear sniffing in the back or snorting, that's my dog. I don't know what she's doing. But historical fiction, I've just not been very impressed with a lot of the historical fiction I've been reading lately, and I've just been disappointed in this genre and what's been coming out. But this redeemed itself. The historical fiction is now redeemed thanks to Susan Meissner, because I read The Last Year of the War, enjoyed it, but then I picked this up, and this was like a best read for this year. This one was great because it is historical fiction. It was about a time period that I didn't know much about the San Francisco earthquake, and that's what this revolves around. It's not much about that, but it is about that, so it piqued my interest in that time, that event in history. And the story was amazing. It just took me for a ride. This was a roller coaster, so I really enjoyed that one. The next one on the list is a Victorian classic. It is by Elizabeth Gaskell, and it's Mary Barton. I must say that every Elizabeth Gaskell that I read, I enjoy, but I don't always give them 5 stars. With this one, it was a wow moment. And I'm noticing that as I go through here, right in the middle of the story, you're going along nicely, you're enjoying the story, and then right in the middle of it is a wow. Something happens and everything changes in the story. And so this one really was a memorable one that I do want to revisit. So that was a favorite this year. Here's another Victorian classic. I read this one. This kicked off Victober for me this past Victober. And it set the tone for a great Victober. I mean, it really was a hit for me. And that is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This was one exciting book. It is pretty dramatic, and a lot of times I think that books can be over dramatic. But this one, wow, I just could not stop reading. I highly recommend this as one. If you haven't read a lot of Victorian and you want a book that is plot driven, but the characters are great too, this is one that you will, I think you'll love. It is an adventure for sure. There's mystery, there's all kinds of twists and turns. It is a great book, and I do want to reread this one too. So that was the highlight for Victober, was kickstarting it with that one. I'll go ahead and say, no, I'll tell you a different one because I have some other Victorian ones on here too. So the next one on my list is one that Janelle at Too Fond of Books had talked about in this list. She was given this list of books to read during the autumn, during the fall season. And she happened to mention this one, I think right at the end. But she said one little thing, and I said, I gotta read that. She told the premise of the story. It's By the Pricking of My Thumbs by Agatha Christie. And Janelle just gave this little snippet that at the beginning of the story, this older lady looks over at the woman and asks her, is it your child in the fireplace? For some reason, it just piqued my interest, and I immediately said, I've got to read that. The very next week, I picked this book up because I already had it on my shelf, and I loved it. It was so exciting, and it was just what I wanted. This Agatha Christie is what I want in an Agatha Christie. It's what I want in any book. There's some gothic vibes to this one. There's a little creepiness. It was the perfect fall read because in September and October, I do, once it starts getting chilly and it, gets darker earlier in the day, I just like those, gothic, creepy kind of books. Nothing too scary, but enough of that. And this was the perfect blend of gothic, a little creepy, and a great mystery. So I highly recommend By the Pricking of My Thumbs. I'm so glad that Janelle mentioned this one. After that, I have just watched everything Janelle puts out because she made a fast friend for sure when she did that video. And ever since, I'm like, okay, give me more to read. And this was definitely a hit for me. So I highly recommend By the Pricking of My Thumbs. It was a favorite this year. Another one that is a favorite this year that has been talked about a lot on BookTube is Patty Callahan's Once Upon a Wardrobe. I read The Chronicles of Narnia with my son this year. We buddy read that. And then I read this right at the end of the year. I think I read this at the 1st of December. It was wonderful. But I will say the reason I think that this was so wonderful for me was because I had went through the Chronicles of Narnia this year. And this just, I felt like I was revisiting Narnia in a more intimate way. I don't even know how to describe the feelings. It was almost nostalgic, even though I just read it. I just felt like I was revisiting, getting to know C.S. Lewis a little bit better. And this is fiction, but there's a lot of C.S. Lewis in here and a lot pertaining to the wardrobe, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in this one. It was just a beautiful story. That's not the story. The story is not Narnia, but Narnia is intertwined as she tells her story. Wonderful historical fiction again, and I absolutely loved it. Another Victorian classic was this is my copy. I have this beautiful set of Charles Dickens books, was A Tale of Two Cities. I was blown away by this story too. Now, when I first started this, the first chapter or so, I was a little confused, and I actually had to go back and read because there were so many characters introduced right at the beginning of the story, and it was like different events, and I couldn't keep up with it. So I went back, I took my time, and I just went slowly through it. And once I had the hang of, okay, these are the characters and these are the events, then I was in the story and I was invested and completely engrossed in the story. And wow, what a message that's in this story. I love this story because it's like word pictures to me. When I think about A Tale of Two Cities, it's different than most of the Charles Dickens I've read. Now, I haven't read that many, a handful of Charles Dickens, but this one is different because it's more, like I said, visual to me. When I think about this, I think about certain pictures, like there's this barrel of wine that burst in the story. I think about that. I think about this lady who is knitting the whole time and what she's knitting. There's certain pictures that I think of. I don't want to say too much about some of the pictures, but that come to mind when I think about this story. And the French Revolution is based on, is set during the French Revolution. It is a book that I will never forget, and there are certain lines in this book that I'll never forget too, that stand out. So that is why this was definitely a favorite for this year, but it was a difficult read. I will say this one was probably the most challenging book I read this year, but well worth it. I really enjoyed that one. Another Victorian classic was The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. I don't know why this surprised me so much. Maybe because I've heard so much about Thomas Hardy, and to me, it just doesn't sound like I will enjoy his work because he sounds like a Debbie Downer. Every time someone talks about Thomas Hardy, it just sounds like he writes cynical and it's depressing. So I didn't have high hopes for this, but this was the group read for Victober. So I had it on my shelf. I've wanted to try Thomas Hardy, but I've been afraid because of what everyone says about his depressing work. But I loved this. Now, I will say that it was depressing. And as I read it, I had to actually change when I was reading it, because I was reading this right before I went to bed. And I was like, I don't want that in my mind. I have to read something a little more lighthearted when I go to bed. So I changed it to the morning, and I started reading it in the morning time because it is depressing. However, his writing is magnificent. And the way he told the story, and from the beginning when he sets it up, you feel like you are there. I was amazed at his talent for making me feel like I was actually one of the characters in the story. I don't know of another writer, and I have lots of favorite writers, but I don't know of another writer who made me feel that intimately connected that quickly in a story as I did in this one. This one wasn't as long as some of his others, but I am interested in trying them because I did love The Mayor of Casterbridge, and I was pleasantly surprised. Can't stop thinking about this one. There's a certain image, again, another word picture in this one, about a little bird that I will never forget. So yes, this was a favorite too. Another Agatha Christie on this list. Now, I've been reading through a lot of Agatha Christie's, and I could have put several others because there were some other 5-star reads for me for Agatha Christie. But By the Pricking of My Thumbs, and then this one at Bertrams Hotel, which, by the way, Janelle recommended too. So maybe I just need to go to Janelle and say, tell me what to read. But anyway, she recommended this one too. At Bertrams Hotel was a fantastic one as well. I loved the characters in this one. I loved the setting of this hotel. The idea that it was eerily the same after decades, that was weird to me. And then there was this one guy in this story that had the best personality that blew the story out of the water for me. And I just loved it. I love the way that Agatha Christie used this one person as part of this story. And I can't say too much more about it, but it was fantastic. And I loved it, and I will never forget at Bertrams Hotel. One thing too was, this is a Miss Marple. I think it was my second Miss Marple, because I haven't read a lot of those. And now that I have the Miss Marple, the Joan Hicks and Miss Marple DVD set, I can't wait to watch this episode. I hope that it's a good adaptation, since I love this one so much. So this was another favorite. And I keep saying this was another favorite. You know that. This is the best books. So anyway, I'll try not to say that anymore. Okay, the next one is My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell. Is that how you say it? Durrell or Durrell? I don't know. Anyway, this was fantastic. Nikki from Red Dot Reads has talked about this several times on her channel. So I finally picked it up and read it. I think I read it during the summertime. And yes, because it was the summer when I read it, because I remember saying it was a fantastic read for the summer. Loved every minute of this book. This was such a surprise. It reminded me a little bit of James Herriot, how it's episodic. Each chapter is like another little story in the life of this quirky family. They are super interesting. Everyone has just a unique personality, and there's animals involved, which I love animal stories, so this was perfect for me. I think there's actually more in this set, so I need to pick up more in this book, in this series. I don't know if it's a series or not, but I think it is. If not, I'll just reread this one because it was so much fun. Another surprise for me, and that's why it's on this list, is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I promised myself I would never pick up another Sherlock Holmes because I read the first one and couldn't stand it. And I just thought, okay, everybody goes on about it and it's just not for me. But then my son told me to pick up The Hound of the Baskervilles, and I think that's on here too. It's next, so I'll just go ahead and say The Hound of the Baskervilles and The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes were favorite reads. They surprised me completely in how much I loved the Sherlock Holmes series, and now I am totally in love, and I am continuing reading through the Sherlock Holmes. Now, I haven't read any more novels. The Hound of the Baskervilles was a novel, and I loved it, but these were short stories, and the memoirs that I'm reading now are short stories. And I think I enjoyed the short story better, but I did love The Hound of the Baskervilles. However, that's not very long. So I'm not sure how I will feel about the novels, but I do love Sherlock Holmes in this short form, and I loved Sherlock Holmes in The Hound of the Baskervilles. So that was just a surprise, and so I did want to mention that as a favorite this year. Another surprise I had was The 101 Dalmatians by Dodie Smith. I cannot believe how wonderful this book is. This was chosen for the Kindred Spirits Club. Kate Howe hosts the Kindred Spirits Club, and if you enjoy comfort, cozy kind of books, you should join us because that's what we read in that group. A lot of just heartwarming, wonderful stories. And I have discovered a lot through Kate's channel as well as the Kindred Spirits Club. And so at the end of the year, I had not participated as much as I wanted in the Kindred Spirits Club last year. So I said, I don't know what she's reading next, but I'm going to read it. And it happened to be this one. I had just read I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, which I enjoyed, but it wasn't a favorite. This, though, blew me away. It's from the dog's perspective, and I loved it. I absolutely thought it was brilliant. Now, I am a dog lover. I'm an animal lover. I love animals. I just think animals are wonderful. They just add so much to my life. I can sit and just watch cat videos. I'm just one of those people. So if you're not an animal lover or a dog lover, you may not love this like I did. But I just thought it was such a sweet, heartwarming story. I fell in love with this, and now I want to go back and watch the 101 Dalmatians cartoon. I know that they have some other adaptations that you as commenters have mentioned to me that I need to go watch too. I am absolutely in love with 101 Dalmatians, and this was quite a surprise. Another Victorian classic that was a favorite this year was Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I've talked about this several times, so I won't say too much about it. But I buddy read this, and we're going to continue buddy reading every Victober a Mary Elizabeth Braddon because we enjoyed this one so much. I think it was a hit for all of us in that group, and so I'm really excited that we're going to continue. This was my first by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, and it was wonderful. It was a roller coaster of a ride, and it was well balanced in this one too. Gemma from Gemma Books mentioned while we were buddy reading this how balanced it was with character, setting, plot. Everything just worked so well together in this story, and I was really impressed with her writing. So yes, this was quite a surprise too. And if you notice, I have a lot of Victorian classics on this list because I just love Victorian literature, and so when I read them, I don't know why, they just capture me in a way that other literature just can't. So I am always on the lookout for more great Victorian literature. So if there's one that I have not mentioned that you love, please leave it in the comments because I'm always looking for more. And I know there's a lot out there, so if you can kind of focus me in on maybe a certain author that you love or a certain title, I would appreciate that. Now this one is a different kind of book, but I fell in love with it at the beginning of the year. I read Miss Bunkles' book by D.E. Stevenson. This was such a delight. It was so funny. It had me from the very first page. It is one of those heartwarming, funny books about a little country village, a little English village where everybody knows everybody and everybody's in everybody's business. And for some reason, I love those. I love the community of that. I love the community and how that they know each other and they are in each other's business, but in the end, they really care about each other. And so this was just so much fun. I've fallen in love with D.E. Stevenson. I actually read another D.E. Stevenson just last week that I loved, and so I can't wait to pick up more. And this was, again, my first and fantastic read by D.E. Stevenson. Another one that was a favorite that is on my shelf and I didn't pull it off was The Giver by Lois Lowry. That one is totally different than anything else on this list. It is a dystopian and it's middle grade. I read that because it is a Newbery Award winner. And I actually had met Lois Lowry. She did a book talk and I met her one time. And I had read several of her books, but not her most famous, which is The Giver. The Giver is totally different than what I had expected, but I loved it. And it was such a thought-provoking book. There was a lot of things in it because it is dystopian. There was a lot of thought-provoking topics within that story, and I just could not stop thinking about it. So that's why it makes this list. My son actually bought me the whole quartet of that. I didn't know that there were more in that series until I posted about The Giver this year, and different ones mentioned that that was a series. So I was excited to receive for Christmas by my son. He gave me the quartet, so I will be reading more of that this year. Another favorite is not one book, but I have the whole set here, and that is The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I had already read The Magician's Nephew as well as The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think I had actually read both of those twice, but I'd never gone on with the series. And so my son and I read these starting in January. We worked our way through, and it was wonderful. Most every book, aside from I think one, I gave 5 stars to. It was that good to me. I enjoyed this so much. I enjoyed going back every time we would open another book. We were going back to Narnia, and I loved that about it. There was one book, The Horse and His Boy. I didn't care for that one that much. I think I might have given it 3 stars. But the rest were wonderful. And I highly recommend The Chronicles of Narnia if you've not read it. I don't know where I am on this list, but I think I have 6 left. And I just want to say that these are my favorite of the year. I loved all of those other books, and they were favorites, and they were 5-star reads. But these 6 stand out. If I could only choose 6 books, these were the 6 I would choose. The first is Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, as well as The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. I buddy read both of these, this one at the beginning of the year and this toward the end of the year. And I buddy read it with Alice from Alice in the Giant Bookshelf, as well as Art from A Bookshelf Odyssey. And we had such fun going through and discussing this. They are great buddy readers, and they just brought a lot to the table as we talked about these books. But Ray Bradbury is just such a thought-provoking writer. He writes a lot of sci-fi and dystopian, and it's not really horror, but it can be a little creepier, that kind of story. And he is just wonderful. He was a genius at what he did, and I love it. This one, The Illustrated Man, is a short story collection, but Something Wicked This Way Comes is a full-length novel, and both were amazing. And I don't know that I could choose one or the other as my favorite. I absolutely loved both for different reasons. And this one I have just tabbed all up. I actually want to go back and revisit these tabs and reread it. And these are all, again, short stories, and I want to reread them too. They are just both such memorable reads and thought-provoking, and I highly recommend Ray Bradbury if you've never read him. He just has a way of thinking about the world and human nature in a way that just blew me away. The next one is The Other Bennett Sister. This is totally different than Ray Bradbury, but The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. This read to me like a Jane Austen novel or a classic literature, and I love classic literature. It blew me away, and I absolutely loved it. If you have not read The Other Bennett Sister, it is a sort of a spin-off from Pride and Prejudice. It was wonderful, and it really felt like a sequel. It really felt like a sequel to Pride and Prejudice, which I have never read anything, any kind of retelling or anything that was so close to, I mean, you can't write like Jane Austen, let's face it, but she had done her homework. This Janice Hadlow, she has really studied Jane Austen, and you can tell it because she did a great job with this one. And I hope that she'll write more like this because I just loved it. This was a great way to celebrate Jane Austen. If you are a fan of Jane Austen and you've read them over and over and you want something that just, you know, nods to Jane Austen in a wonderful, positive way, because sometimes it's like, no, just don't do that. But this one does. This one truly celebrates Jane Austen and her literature. So I highly recommend this one. The next one, the next 3 are my top 3, and that is Christy by Catherine Marshall. This was in a free bin, and I had this book for years, and it sat on my shelf, and I don't know why I never read it. I knew I needed to because it's the namesake for the Christy Awards, which is a Christian fiction award. And I can see why. I read this book and just cried like a baby. And I didn't even know why I was crying, because what was going on in the plot, even though there are some hard scenes that would make you cry, it wasn't even the scenes. It was just my spiritual connection with this story. It just, as I was reading it, I felt so overwhelmed by the telling of the story, and Christy, the main character, there was just some kind of connection with it that I can't even describe. And I would just cry happy tears as I read it. It was a wonderful experience, and I highly recommend Christy if you've never read it. It is historical fiction, and it's set in the mountains. I think it's like the 1930s. I can't remember exactly, but I think it's like that time period. A wonderful story. I highly recommend it. And then I read one that I had been putting off forever, and that was Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. Wow, what a masterpiece. This is a long story. I read it for March of the Mammoths. I'm so glad I did. I thought it was going to take me forever to get through it, but I could not put it down. Talk about a page turner. This is a page turner. And the thing that really surprised me the most with this is I did not like any of the characters. There's one or two characters that I like, okay, but the main characters of this story are just horrible. They're just horrible people. They make horrible decisions, but you can't help but read it. It is written so well. I have never read a book that was so well written, where the character development, the setting, the plot was so well written as this. This is a masterpiece to me. I have never read anything like it. And I was amazed at how much I did enjoy it. Now, it is full of things that will make you cringe based on, it is Civil War, and it's from Scarlett's point of view, who is this Southern belle. So there are some cringy things, you know, in it, but it is of its time, and so you have to take that into consideration. I still loved it and gave it 5 stars, and I will be reading this one again. I highly recommend it. If you want a historical fiction based in during the Civil War, there's a lot of Civil War II in it that I was not expecting, but there is a lot of details about the Civil War as well. And then finally, if I had to say one book that was my absolute favorite, you probably already know because I talk about this book all the time, and that is The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. This blew me away. The main character of this story was such a different character. I had never read anything like this book. I'd never read a character like her. She was so quirky. The story was quirky and weird and fun and sad all at the same time. I absolutely loved this story. And if you know of any other stories that are like The Blue Castle, if you've read it, please let me know, because I don't think you can find one. I just don't think you can find anything like The Blue Castle. And so this is by far my favorite read of the year. But all these others too were fantastic. I had a wonderful year of reading. I read lots of books that I could have mentioned on this list, but I just didn't have time or room enough to share those. So these are my favorites for the year. What was your all-time favorite for 2022? Let me know that in the comments. And have you read any of these as well? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.